Hi, everyone.
Hello.
Afternoon.
Hi.
Good to see everybody.
Can you hear me, everyone?
Yes.
By the way, everyone, I may have to drop off if I have to take a call, but I'll keep you guys posted.
Okay.
Hi, Meg. Good to see you.
Meg, are you able to hear us okay?
Yes.
I think we're just waiting for Jeff. Is that right, Mayor?
I believe so. Do we have all our council members here? I know we got an email that Tina wasn't able to make it.
Hi, Jeff. Good to see you.
Then a little thumbs up thing pops up. How cool is that?
All right. Jeff, it's good to see you. Meg, it's great to see you as well.
Oh, it's good to see me and great to see Meg.
I knew you were going to say something, weren't you?
Thanks,
I knew you
Mayor.
were going to say something. I need a bigger screen. Whoops. No, let's not do that. All right, Chris, are we good to go or we get started?
We are good to go. We are recording and streaming.
Perfect. All right. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you. Thank you, State Senator Jeff Bridges. Thank you, State Representative Meg Froelich, for making time for us today. Thank you to all our city council members for taking time out of their busy day as well to join us for this Q&A with our state representatives. I think you all know me. I'm Nathaniel Sierra. I'm mayor for the city of Englewood, as well as council member for District 1. If each council member could go ahead and introduce themselves, starting with District 2, then District 3 and District 4, and any of the at-larges, and then we'll move on to city staff. So, Chelsea, do you want to just introduce yourself?
Yeah, good to see you guys again. Chelsea Camp, District 2, northeast corner of the city.
Good afternoon, Joe Anderson, District 3, which is the southwest-ish, southeast corner of the district. Thank you.
I'm Steve Lord, District 4, the real southwest portion of Englewood, the part that borders Littleton and Sheridan.
Perfect. Are any of our at-larges on? I don't see them. So, city manager, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Good afternoon, Sean Lewis, City Manager.
City attorney?
Tamara Niles, City Attorney.
Deputy City Manager. Come on, Tim. Come on.
He's talking. We can't hear him though.
Ah,
He's not on mute.
or
You
Deputy
got some
City
mic
Man-
issues, Tim.
Yeah. We'll move on to our Chief of Police. I saw him on here.
Hey, good afternoon, Sam Watson, Chief of Police.
Peter, you want to introduce all your titles?
Yeah, good afternoon. Peter Van Rye. I'm the Director of South Platte Renew and the City of Englewood Utilities.
Director of Communications.
Hello, everybody. I'm Chris Hargeth. I'm the Director of Communications. Good to see you all.
Kevin, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Kevin Ingalls, Finance Manager for the city.
Who am I missing? I thought I saw a name. City Clerk.
Jackie McKinnon, Senior Deputy City Clerk.
All right. And let's see here. We got Chris, Peter. Tim, are you able to, is your mic working now? No, still not. And then Liz, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, my camera's not working, but I'm Liz. I'm the management fellow at the city.
Thank you, Liz. And Krista, just introduce yourself.
Krista Gravy, Executive Assistant for the City Manager and City Council.
Oh, I see Victor's online as well. Victor, do you want to introduce yourself?
Good afternoon, everybody. Victor Rochelle, Director of Public Works.
Perfect. All right. And I believe that's everyone. I hope I didn't miss anyone, but I guess just real quick, State Senator Jeff and State Representative Meg, do you want to quickly introduce yourself before we go into our items?
We could go alphabetical.
Hey, everyone, I'm State
Anyway,
Senator Jeff Bridges. Oh, and we could both go at the same time. Go ahead, Meg.
Oh, that's funny. Anyway, Meg Froelich, Sheridan, Englewood, and Cherry Hills, and a sliver of Denver, all within Senate District 26.
So much.
State Senator Jeff Bridges. We've got all of HD3, which includes what Meg just mentioned. So the district is Sheridan, Englewood, Cherry Hills, Greenwood Village, and then a little bit of Southwest Denver, some unincorporated, and Southeast Denver.
Perfect. Well, thank you both. I know that you guys put in a lot of work over this past year, so I want to thank you personally for what you've done over the last year, for taking on the big issues that we've seen across the state. I also want to thank you for all the work that you've done in support of our city. And I'll start off with just the flexible wipes legislation. Just thank you very much. I know that that was a big ask of our South Platte Water Renew. So the city of Englewood as well as the city of Littleton, thank you for that.
I think you all have had a very big past year too. So thank you for all you've done this last year.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much, Jeff, for that. So some of the big items that we'll talk about is just some of those big things that we still want to accomplish over the next term. Obviously, affordable housing could be one of those, but I'll start off by just talking about just the lead reduction program. It's been something that the city has been taking part of here recently. We've been taking inventory. I believe that we've already completed the inventory, and we're about 3,000 lead service lines that we have within the city of Englewood itself, which actually is an improvement from where we thought we were. We thought we were going to be over 5,000 lead service lines over the course of the city, but it's a little bit lower than that. It's still coming at a cost of about $40 million is what we're estimating at this point, Jeff and Meg. So I think the issue that we have here is that we've been asking our residents quite a bit in terms of just increases across all our utilities, whether it's water, stormwater, and sewer. And what we're asking for as part of the lead reduction program is just additional support through grants, through direct appropriation. We're just looking to see if there's something that we can do in order to release or kind of reduce the cost burden to some of our citizens as we look to take action with some of the lead reduction programs over the next couple of years, actually the next 10 years. So Jeff and Meg, I'll open it to you if you have any questions regarding this, or actually Director of Utilities, Peter, do you have anything to add to this?
Yeah, the one thing I'll add to this, and thank you, Mayor, is so this morning we submitted send on our application to the SRF for $40 million. And that application is actually accessing funding through the infrastructure bill from a year and a half ago. And within the infrastructure bill was a focus on removing lead service lines throughout the US. And the thing that we could use help on is we're submitted for 40 million. The way that funding is structured is 48% of it is principal forgiveness, so grant, and 52 is low interest loan through the SRF. And because of the way the federal infrastructure money has been reapportioned and re-sent to different states, what we've been told by the SRF is the max principal forgiveness that we can get is 10 million. Whereas if we were getting principal forgiveness on the full 40 million, we'd be looking closer to 20 million, which would help us with this removal of all those 3,000 lead service lines. Now, I know there's been some issues with certain states got a whole bunch of funding and then they've sent it back. And so if there's any way that we can help put the pressure on the feds to help increase that that amount that was identified in that infrastructure bill for that principal forgiveness, that would really help us as we essentially, we think we can remove all of our lead service lines in the next 3 years if it all goes to plan. So that's really what we'd be looking for support for. Thank you, Mayor.
State Senator Bridges or?
Sure. Yeah. This is something that as we work with the Colorado Department of CDPHE, Colorado Department of Health and something there's grant programs that they have to assist cities across the state as they're working to meet health standards. And we know that the federal dollars that came in to fix this are probably not enough. So I would love to get the federal government to change some of their rules and regs on all sorts of different things. Meg and I, we can reach out to our federal delegation to see if they can have any impact on adjusting that. But I know here in the state, we are working really hard to keep our eye on all of those federal dollars and not give any of them back to the feds. So let me check in with CDPHE and see what kind of resources they have available specifically for lead service lines. It was something we talked about at the Joint Budget Committee hearing just yesterday. They're asking for 1.4 million in general fund, but it's not grants out. It is support internal to, I think, provide help and support to folks across the state to apply for some of those federal grant monies. So would love to make sure, if you're not already connected with the folks at CDPHE, would love to make that connection for you. And again, I'll check in on what sort of grant money they have available to help with that. There is a lot.
That's great to hear.
I think,
Go ahead, Mike.
the other piece that Jeff mentioned is that federal piece, and Jason Crow is new to Englewood, so to the extent that we can facilitate conversations, but I think that exactly that piece financially is going to be the only thing the state is going to do is help you get federal money, is provide funds in assistance, technical assistance to help you access the Fed money, because it pales, our state funds pale in comparison to the IRA money.
And that's what I think we would be looking for, is that the money's there from the feds. It's how it's getting divvied out, and the thought is that the Colorado's maybe not getting its total fair share of what was maybe allocated because of the way it's distributing. So any way to help increase that. I mean, we're already thinking we're going to get 10 million of principal forgiveness. We're just trying to maximize that since it was the infrastructure bill. So thank you very much.
It's that delicate dance with home rule and local control. And so there are states in which the State Department does all the granting, and then they just get this big chunk. So we do it this locally way.
Yeah, and I mean, I think bigger picture, right? Drinking lead is really bad, And there's been more research even in the last 10 years on how really bad it is for kids, which is part of why a few years ago, with some of those initial ARPA dollars, we at the state level implemented testing statewide in our schools. Because we know, especially for young people, it has really severe negative consequences. Getting it out of lines, water lines around the city is really important for the folks here in Englewood. Doesn't mean that it's cheap, right? There's a lot of things that you all have to do as the folks that are on the ground making those changes at the city level that you need support from us to do. And again, if you aren't already in communication with the folks at CDPHE, happy to make that connection and emphasize to them that this is something they need to prioritize. I will say they do already know. I mean, there's so much work being done around our state to get rid of those lead lines. So it's something they're working on. And if you're not directly connected, we'll make sure you are. And Meg and I will also talk to Jason and say, Jason, fix those federal government people. They say they're giving us money and they're not giving us enough. In Colorado, this is like, I'm going to go on just a small rant here. Colorado is a net giver. We pay more in federal taxes statewide than we get back from the federal government. And that is, I am on a constant quest to get our fair share back from the feds. It's something I've worked hard on the Joint Budget Committee. By the way, the Joint Budget Committee, for folks who don't know, 6 legislators out of 100 essentially get to the first pass on the budget. It has to be approved by the whole legislature, but we spend $40 billion a year, and we do it very responsibly, mostly.
Thank you for that, Jeff and Meg. I think, Steve, you have the next question.
Yeah, this dovetails pretty nicely with the lead reduction, and it concerns PFAS, or what's commonly termed as forever chemicals. The city is seeing some effects from regulatory pressure related to PFAS as well. And this is different from lead in that this is related to a problem that we didn't cause. We don't have any processes that produce PFAS, and yet they're everywhere. So we receive them in our water system and our sewer plant as well. And we need to find a way to get rid of them. And right now we have processes like our biosolids process at the wastewater treatment plant, where we truck the majority of our solid waste from that plant off to a farm. If we face increasing regulatory pressure for PFAS as a byproduct of that process, we may not be able to do that anymore. We would have to find another method for disposing of those because of PFAS. We know that the state's worked on this. We recently got a grant, $426,000 to pilot PFAS treatment. And that helps us. Our city was at the forefront, basically, regionally, of testing for these chemicals. There's also been some legislation in 2022, House Bill 221345. And then the EPA regulations, again, this is another federal impact, are increasing on this as well. And this is probably what gives us the most exposure. Director Van Rye can confirm this, particular to our wastewater treatment plant. But we would ask for continued support, eliminating PFAS overall from the supply chain, so that it becomes less of a problem over time. And regarding sort of the gentler hand of regulation, we want to see some scientific basis for whatever regulations are passed. The biggest example of this I can think of is that some of the testing limits are effectively lower than what can be tested right now. So if you can't detect it using a basic scientific test, or there's 1 or 2 labs in the entire country that can, that's not a very good measure, in my opinion. But the regulation continues. And then additional funding and support for research and technology improvements. Again, I'll go back to our wastewater treatment plant as an example of this. We have a pilot and research center portion of that plant that can be used to test new processes, including potentially processes that could remove PFAS from the wastewater stream.
That is, thank you for bringing that up, Councilmember Ward. I think the sludge from the wastewater treatment, there's a lot of sludge. I never know what the
sludge.
What do you call it, Peter?
Sludge.
Sludge. The sludge is surprising, not surprisingly maybe, but anyway, all eyes are on the sludge. It's like one of the hottest topics in our environmental caucuses. And that's because the whole PFAS problem in farming in Maine was traced to the sludge from their wastewater treatment plant. So that's definitely a area of concern, and I'm look forward to working with you guys on how we see if we can identify and then treat the PFAS that's coming out of the system, that's in the system through no fault of your own, as you said. The other piece that is ramping up and I hope has big impact on this is the extended producer responsibility legislation. That'll also be a fund if it's funded by the JBC in this next iteration. So if that process and that bill doesn't get the funding in this next budget cycle, then we're back to the drawing board. But that was supposed to be a pathway to plastics in general. And of course, the big part of why we want to address plastics is PFAS. So those are the two big things I think are on the horizon. Area of interest for me. I know it's an area of interest for Jeff as well. And I don't know if I have more to say about that, but I just went to a big convening on sustainable ag and much sludge talk.
I like sludge. I just put into the chat. I texted the CDPHE folks, and that is the link to where to apply. I believe they say they're already working with you, Peter, and so I'll check in on where you are in that process. But want to make sure that you have that and have applied for those grants and low interest loans there.
Thank you, Senator. And yes, we have actually been working quite closely with Nicole Rowan and the whole division over there. We actually meet with them on a fairly regular basis. And I think they've been good with helping us. And like I said, those grants were really helpful for PFAS and additionally on the lead side as well. And so any further help with it, I think this really goes back to your net exporter of money thing from a funding perspective. Yeah. That's really the thing, is the federal dollars. And so thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Yep. And again, we'll follow up with Jason on that. And PFAS is similar. And that's something actually, while CDPHE was in front of the budget committee yesterday, and one of the cool things about the budget committee is every department comes because every department needs to get money. And so we have a chance to ask the hard questions to literally everyone. So if you guys ever have a challenge with a particular department, let me know. It is my great joy to ask them hard questions on the mic. So we had a conversation yesterday about, that when they go into a city, oftentimes, and I went to a whole bunch of folks across the state from Dove Creek to Julesburg over this last summer. And there were a lot of people that are like, oh, CDPHE is making us do stuff. And oftentimes it's not CDPHE, oftentimes it's federal rules and regs, it's the EPA. And the standards change because the science changes. And that's, I think, often a hard thing for folks to really wrap their head around, that like science is just science, but science is constantly learning more. I mean, that's sort of what science is the accumulation of knowledge over time. And as we accumulate more knowledge, oftentimes what we thought was safe turns out not to be. But I totally hear your point on asking you to make tests that you can't make. Is like, that doesn't make any sense. So I'll check back in on that. You're not the first person to say that. I think the details on that testing is that's the standard and that's where they're moving to, but they understand that those tests aren't currently available. And so no one is actually being held to that particular test because you can't actually hold people to that test because it doesn't exist. So that's my understanding of where we are on that. Someone else raised it a couple of years ago and I checked in. So if that's not the case, let me know. And again, we'll talk with CDPHE. Not surprised that CDPHE is the first two topics of conversation on this, though.
Can
Just
you
one
guess
more
the
thing,
third?
Peter, can you quickly remind me, refresh my memory, how many trucks per day we send to the farm and how many truckloads per day go to the landfill? Because this would change if we had to dispose of the PFAS otherwise, or the biosolids.
Yeah, so we send 4 tractor trailer loads to the farms on a daily basis of biosolids that we then land apply. As far as actual waste that goes to a landfill, it's one roll-off truck, 1 or 2 a week that goes to a landfill. So the vast majority of what comes out of SPR actually is reintroduced back into the environment in a clean form. And I think that, and I'm glad you mentioned the main regulation, because that's part of the challenge here is the application of regulations across the entire US that maybe, are difficult in the Northeast, but are different out here because of the way water works out here and things like that.
And this is what we want. We want this circular economy. We want the waste going, so we're in favor of it. And I hope the EPR legislation, which is all about that as well. And then Senator Cutter, who did the EPR bill, and I have another one on pyrolysis. Again, I'm bad on pronunciation, but she's kind of our champion on plastics. And so happy to facilitate conversations. And I think what we want is this, we want folks doing exactly what you're doing. And it's what I brag about with South Platte Renew all the time, is all the ways in which you're promoting this circular economy and doing right by the planet. So I hope we get there.
And the employer, the responsibility, the EPR legislation that Meg, I think you sponsored that, right? No? Oh, well.
I think I co-sponsored or something, but I wasn't
Okay.
my jam.
It was a fascinating bill that created a nonprofit in the state that is going to set up sort of a standard availability and consistent availability for recycling across the state. Colorado weirdly has one of the lowest recycling rates in the entire country. And so in part of that is that recycling is different in Denver and Boulder and Broomfield and Lamar and Springfield and Durango. And so what we want is consistency across the state. So this is a nonprofit that will, through fees on producers like Coke bottlers, who, by the way, all supported this. They asked for this. This came from these producers. Through fees on those producers, we'll be able to have consistent recycling across the state, which will not only allow us as citizens to recycle more easily, it will create a consistent feedstock for companies that are looking for those recycled materials to start, grow, and stay here in Colorado because of that consistent feedstock, both in terms of quality and supply. So it's a really cool bill. And a really cool plan that'll be coming up that is related in many ways to all of what we're talking about here, because hopefully that keeps some of those toxic forever chemicals out of where it is that we have to process them.
Thank you for that, Joe. I think you have the next question.
What Jeff said.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I wanted to bring up some issues regarding public safety and policing. As you guys are both familiar with Englewood, and we've had a big conversation this last year, and I think public safety policing was a big part of that. There's a general perception in the city, if not the reality, that crime is on the rise, or at least visible crime is on the rise, and things are getting a lot of media attention. We've had several high-profile incidents in Englewood this last year, and I've heard from a lot of citizens that we're seeing challenges on this front, and they don't feel as safe as they used to feel in the city. We've done a lot as city council over the last few years to try to address these issues. We've expanded all alternative policing. Our citizens voted a tax increase to address that alternative policing. We've hired new police officers, desk officers, but I find myself often in conversations with people getting to the point of saying, we're doing everything we can, and I think we need some help from the state. And they say, well, then get some help from the state. So here I am with a few kind of legislative asks on the policing front. And our things are, we're simply aligning here with the Public Safety Colorado Coalition statement, which includes the Colorado Association of Police Chiefs and the county sheriffs of Colorado and the Colorado Fraternal Order of Police. So you may be familiar with some of these, but there are three things I want to highlight here that I think if we were able to implement these at the state level, it would really help our police locally. Number one, bail bond reform. Bail bond reform that includes limiting personal recognizance bonds and pretrial policies, previous changes to Colorado law to expand the use of personal recognizance bonds have made our communities less safe. While these bonds are a way to keep lower risk individuals out of jail while awaiting trial, they are being used too often for higher risk criminals who likely have no intention to abide by the terms of these bonds. So we're asking the legislature to consider ways to hold those accountable for not following the terms of those PR bonds and set more common sense criteria for individuals and alleged crimes where issuing PR bond is appropriate. So that's the first one, bail bond reform. Second one, reinstating possession of a weapon by a previous offender, POWPO, charges for aggravated motor vehicle theft and drug felonies. Legislation in 2022 added several felonies that would trigger state prosecution for gun possession. However, the coalition believes aggravated motor vehicle theft and drug felonies must be added to that list to address overall public safety, increases in violent crime in Colorado, and the increased danger that gun possession is placing on public and law enforcement officers. And so we have bail bond reform and reinstating the possession of weapon by a previous offender. Finally, we're interested in strengthening laws that provide for more consequences for auto thefts. Auto thefts have been on the rise, and we're certainly seeing that here in Englewood. So I'll see if Police Chief Watson has anything to add to these considerations, but those are the issues I wanted to bring up.
Yeah, those are very well stated. I know that the both the Colorado Chiefs Association, the Sheriff's Association, and the Fraternal Order of Police have representation down at the state capitol, and they're discussing these issues and working with y'all on trying to draft legislation and look at some of these issues. And I just urge you that to take that into consideration. And they have the full support of me at the police department and I sense the city council, city manager's office as far as crime reduction and looking at legislative tools that help us in that area. So thank you very much for that.
Something big happened with public safety yesterday, right, at JBC?
Yeah, we thanks for the setup, Meg. We voted for $5 million for to help cities that are struggling to keep up with the migrant crisis and what's happening there, and then 1.5 million for grants for, and it's just the detail is escaping me here, but it was both of those were for the Department of Public Safety.
I will just say a political reality that in the House, all of the things mentioned would be incredibly difficult. I don't even know who would feel at this point with the tensions. As I don't even know how to describe them, but I don't even know who would put their name on the bill, and that's why the CAPTA, what's the CAPA? Is that the
CAPA, the Colorado Auto Theft Prevention?
No, that's CAPTA.
CAPA.
The CAPA bill, which was Hendrickson's previous possession for signature.
Paupo was what they called it. Paupo.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm off my acronym game today.
Every time a lobbyist would come up and say, "I want to talk about Paupo," it was a moment of levity until I remembered what it stands for. And I'm like, "Oh, this is not."
Yes.
This is
So
not funny.
I mean, that's why that died. It had Senate. I think it had Senate support. So that's just a sort of a reality. But I think Englewood is doing a lot of good things that maybe citizens don't have as much of a visceral reaction to in terms of crime reduction, but your homelessness initiative, your housing initiatives, all of those efforts actually do, we feel as a caucus, do impact public safety. The other, I've done some work on this from the victim side, and we actually are doing pretty well on funds for car theft victims and towing and impound fees, but we have to do a better job on getting that word out to people so that they can access those funds. I'm trying to think, but what is your sense, Jeff, on where the legislature will go on these issues? We did have a change in the composition of our Judiciary Committee that'll make it a little less painful, but only slightly less painful. It's still and I know the lobbyists for the organizations that the chief mentioned still find our Judiciary Committee in the House a very difficult place to be.
They may find it to be a more difficult place in the Senate this next year too. We had some committee changes that resulted from a leadership election about a month and a half ago. So we'll see what happens legislatively. But I think big picture, I think the most important thing to keep in mind here is that I know Meg and I are both hearing this from our constituents, that people just don't feel as safe in Colorado today as they did even a few years ago. And public safety has moved way up the list in terms of concerns that people have. And especially what we hear, I represent parts of Denver, especially what I'm hearing from folks in Denver is really disturbing. So public safety is extraordinarily important to me. I actually ran the bill 4 years ago that reauthorized CAPPA, the Colorado Auto Theft Prevention Authority, which is viewed, it has won awards nationally, is a model for other states. And last year we put several $1 million more into CAPPA to give grants the way they do to organizations across the state that are working to prevent auto theft. A big piece of this that we talked about on the JBC recently is the software systems that we have, and making sure that when a car is stolen in Englewood, that license plate is immediately available to all other law enforcement folks across the state. The piece on this that we still need to do some more work on, and that is a high priority for the Department of Public Safety and all the folks who work on this, is that after that person is arrested, and this goes to that first part on PR bonds, after the person is arrested, making sure that arrest is in the database, is in a system that is accessible statewide. Because if they get arrested in Englewood and then they're released on a PR bond, and then they very quickly afterwards are arrested, let's say in Jefferson County in a different district, we need to make sure that prosecutor in Jefferson County has at their fingertips the information about what literally just happened a few days ago with this person. Because there are folks who are stealing cars in one jurisdiction, going to another, stealing a car, and still getting released, that would not normally, under current Colorado law, would likely not be released if that information were shared more broadly. So that's something that we're investing in, is making sure that those databases are talking to one another, so that those folks who are committing those crimes repeatedly in different areas are facing the consequences for doing that. And then there is also the penalties. We did increase penalties for auto theft last year. This was a weird, I think kind of racist the way that the law was written before, which is that the penalty, like how severe, whether it was a misdemeanor or felony or what degree misdemeanor, was based on the value of the car. So if you stole a cheap car, it wasn't as big of a deal as if you stole an expensive car. And that to me is absolutely crazy, in large part because the lower income folks in many ways depend even more on their car. They can't just call up Uber when their car is stolen to get around, to get to their job. And yet somehow stealing those cars was less of a penalty, was less severe under law than stealing a more valuable car. So we fixed that last year. I'm really proud that we did that. It was weirdly more of a fight than I thought it should be. I think it's an equity issue. I'm glad we fixed it. And there is more money that has been asked for prosecutors with federal gun crimes. So there are some gun crimes that we don't have laws for here in the state, like trafficking of firearms. But these folks generally tend to be people that we do not want hanging around Colorado and doing whatever it is they're doing here. Federal government doesn't have enough prosecutors to go after the full range of these folks. They're really focused on a couple of more of the, I guess, higher profile or higher danger individuals, but that not to say the folks they're not prosecuting aren't a huge danger to folks in our state. So Denver actually has placed a few attorneys into the U.S. Attorney's Office to prosecute these crimes. There is a request from the Attorney General's office to fund some Colorado attorneys in the Attorney General's office to go and essentially work for the U.S. Attorney prosecuting those crimes. So I agree. I think motor vehicle theft is extraordinarily serious. It is almost always the first offense in a series of offenses that take place, and treating it like it's not a violent crime. Again, the fact that the fact that didn't make it last year was disappointing to me.
And I will say,
I bet we'll try again.
thank you very much for your time. I know you got a lot on your agenda today, and you know, this is a state issue. You know, crime knows no boundaries, and it does cross. In fact, the majority of our arrests in Englewood are from people that from other cities. They come in Englewood, so there really is it crosses over. And then finally, the officers, the fine men and women of all our police department, you know, they're out there taking risks, working hard, putting themselves at physical safety and other safety. You know, some of the legislation that's passed that's made it harder to be a police officer. Made it harder to recruit for police officers. Those are real life issues for the men and women that are out there putting themselves on the front line. And so anything you can do to help us with that helps anything that helps law enforcement will help crime as well. So thank you for your time.
We did have 2 sessions ago or last, increased funds for peace officer mental health services and
the co-responder programs.
Yeah, that was good.
And you mean yeah,
No,
mental health care for officers.
Yeah,
yes,
yeah,
that was my bill as well.
Yeah, and then the co-responder model, which Englewood is doing, and that's good. And then the CAPTA thing, that's where the money came for the victims of car theft to access reimbursement for towing and impound. And then there is in the governor's budget, and it'll be a bill run by Senator Sullivan. I think I'm carrying it in the House to beef up CBI and enforcement on gun safety measures. But yeah, well, as the senator mentioned, we are hearing this from our folks all the time, and it's but I do think that those things we do to just make our community healthier in general, and to address homelessness and housing, and even our property tax relief, our rental assistance, all of those things that we did in the special session. Ultimately, we're doing it to make healthier, thriving communities where there is less crime, but we're definitely hearing it across the board.
Thank you both. Surprise, surprise, but we're behind on time. Are you both good until the top of the hour, or I just wanted to confirm the scheduling on your end?
The senator has stuff. I don't.
Okay.
I mean, it's the holidays. I can stay a little longer.
Okay. I'll pass it over to Chelsea. I know we'll probably just limit the questions that we're going to ask, but big topic.
Sorry, the problem is that Meg and I just have so much to say about these things. We're really we're not the shrinking violets that you were hoping you had elected. So
it's kind of cool that Englewood has a person on JDC. I think as Jeff mentioned, it's only 6 legislators, so it's great that we have that. And then and then
Meg is House leadership too.
Well, so, no, I mean, but I was gonna say that my committee is, housing and local gov. So and that's because that's where our interest lies. So that works out well. So anyway, we're blabbing too much and going over time.
Well, that's a good segue because I want to talk about money and housing. So here we go. Obviously, Meg, I know this is a huge issue for you and for you both, but we'd love to see some more attention focused on some of our small business sustainability grants. You guys obviously know you passed the legislation to get rid of single-use plastics in our restaurants, and we have been working really closely with our Chamber of Commerce Englewood, what's really special about our community is we have a really great restaurant culture, mostly independent restaurants, not a lot of chains happening in Englewood. And when we sat down with our Chamber of Commerce, sat down with a lot of our local businesses and someone from the Restaurant Association, they said that there's still a huge need for more support as restaurants are trying to make that transition to sustainability. And so we would love, the city is working to join the state's Green Business Network next year, but we would also love to see more just direct, simple, not cumbersome, small business grants for those businesses who are trying to make that transition to maybe renewable energy or sustainable products. And when you're on the brink or on the bubble, even just like finding a new vendor can be really challenging. And so as that mandate's coming from the state, we would love just to see more support for the business community as well as they're doing that. So that's a quick plug for that one. And unless you have anything to say, I'll move on to the next one.
Goes into effect January 1. No more plastic bags, January 1. So
Yep.
yeah, totally hear you. It's going to be a huge challenge. So thanks for raising that. And I don't think we can get any more funds between now and January 1. But for next year, certainly, I think we can look into that. And I passed. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, I worked on. OEdit has been fantastic at the support they've given to small businesses across the state. I continue to work with them on ways that we can do even more. Small Business Administration nationally does a great job helping small businesses, but especially when we say, hey, you need to completely change your entire supply chain for how it is that you serve food to go. That's a huge ask, and we should have. We could have last session. There are things we could have done to help make this transition that's coming on January 1 easier. I will be interested to see how severe the crackdown is on January 1, and if it is immediate and harsh, there might be some changes to make to ensure that folks have the time they need to make the change. That being said, they do need to make the change. So, but anything the government asks you to do, the government should give you the resources to do as well. It's like a theory I have on how government should work. So, completely agree with you on that.
Yeah, there's no two more hated words than unfunded mandate. So I love it. And there's always some change in the couch cushions of JVC. So I trust you to hopefully find some. I appreciate it.
Just on that, we have been flush with cash from the feds the last like 4 years from COVID. And this is the first budget where it's like back to reality, folks. In addition, we are going to be handing out billions of dollars in Tabor refunds. So if we could spend the money that we bring in because our economy is booming, then we would be able to fully fund higher ed, K-12, grant programs for businesses. Like it is a strange place to be where our economy is one of the strongest in the nation. Our tax revenues are at a place where we could easily keep up with all of the obligations that we have created for ourselves over the last few years using those federal dollars. And yet we can't because billions of dollars of Tabor refunds. Just side note. So money is going to be harder to come by, unfortunately.
And I mean, we just have not figured out how to get voters to agree with that. How many times have we tried?
Yeah, it's not a popular opinion, but I'm on the JVC, so I see the consequences every day.
People say roads stink, and we say, well, can we keep a portion of your Tabor refund to fix roads? No. Okay. People say it's terrible, our teachers are paid poorly. Can we keep a portion of your Tabor refund to pay teachers? No. So what was this last one? Can we keep a portion of your Tabor refund to help with property taxes? No. So we have not figured out how to initiate a Tabor reform that gets past the voters. So until then, yes. So I know on the beneficial electrification work that I've done, it's almost exclusively focused on residential, because the business community really has the lobbyists and fights that. So we make headway on residential way more faster than we do on business community, although our broader electrification bill that included the school buses and the e-bikes also had an industrial component that was supposedly helping folks to move into their industrial operations to electrification. But I think that's a huge area of interest and concerns over whether or not the grid can handle it. So there's a whole bunch of on that as well.
Pitch for Englewood restaurants, amazing. I love, the Booze to Go bill was actually inspired by a conversation I had with Erica Zerke at the Englewood Grand during COVID. And when we passed that bill, we got Gov to come down to the Grand and sign it there on the bar. So big fan of restaurants and the role they play in our communities. And they are some of the last remaining small businesses, right? Truly a thriving ecosystem of small businesses in that restaurant area. And so we got to make sure we support them.
But they and like back to sort of the lobby and the way things work in the building, it's the one-off restaurants that have to be in compliance with all of the environmental regs, and it's the multiple venues that get exempted out because they have people more likely to fight for them. So hopefully Good Business Colorado and some of the other green alliances are balancing that out, and we have seen a sort of shift. I'm being kind of, but we've seen a shift. I'm with Jeff. Want to be out at Brewability or One Barrel or Gallo, or those are my go-to places. So
No, I appreciate that. That's really helpful. And I'm glad
And
you
I
guys
know you were trying to move us along and we just kept
I am.
talking. Sorry. Yeah,
Okay.
go ahead.
I
I'll
just-
stop now.
We've saved the easiest one for last, which is housing, just casual. So I do want to
I really can't go past the bottom of the hour. I'm just kidding.
We've had a year in Englewood. I want to bring you guys up to speed on some of the stuff that we've been working on and some requests we have for as you guys head back to the Gold Dome. A couple of things, as you know, we took advantage of the grant program, the Innovative Housing Planning Grant Program, so we could do our housing assessment in Englewood. And we can send you all of this data. I'm not going to run through it all with you now, but just so you have kind of a context for what housing looks like in Englewood right now. We are a majority renter city. We have 52% renters, and of those renters, 1 in 4 are severely cost burdened and at risk of being homeless because rents are just increasing at such a dramatic rate. Our housing assessment also came back and told us that as we have aging seniors and then millennials who are all buying houses, we have this really interesting U-curve in our demographics. But the biggest housing gaps that we have in Englewood are pretty significant shortage and deeply affordable, below 30% AMI, around 1,600 units. And then, no surprise, a pretty big gap in missing middle for sale housing, anything from 80% to really 120% AMI. And so as we were responding to that this last year and looking for what we were going to do about it, as you all know, we did a massive rewrite to our development code, the first rewrite in almost 20 years. I'm going to just share a couple of things that we did in that process. We made ADUs legal by right everywhere in the city. We allowed for lot subdivisions in certain areas, so you could do cottage court patterns or single family detached housing. We reduced lot size requirements in several areas. We lowered our parking requirements. We lowered per unit lot area requirements in our multifamily zones. And we also changed the definition of a household in Englewood, the number of people who are unrelated who can live together, from 2 persons, which is what it's been for many years, to 4. And there's a ton more intricacy there. And I think as you are very aware, we did all of that at pretty significant political cost. But looking to the future and looking to see what does Englewood really need to thrive and how do we need to create the housing supply for future generations. A couple other things that we're doing currently is we have applied for Prop 123 funding, and DOLA has accepted our baseline formula. And we just launched our Affordable Housing Task Force. So we have a really great diverse group of business owners and employers in the city and our hospitals in the city, as well as renters, homeowners, people who've lived in affordable housing. Habitat has a representative, really great group of folks to come together and say, what else can we do? And what are the right recommendations that fit the nature of our community? But there are a couple of things from the state that would be really helpful as we continue down this path. Arapahoe County, our delegation of our commissioners and our mayors, we sent a letter to the governor's office on some requests for housing. So we'll send that to you all as well. It has a lot of specific requests, but a couple that I want to just call out quickly. One is around transit-oriented development, in the sense that our city center area, which you may be familiar with where our city hall is currently, we're still looking to redevelop that space. So as we consider what bringing workforce housing or purchasable housing to that space looks like over the next couple of years right off of a light rail stop, what are the opportunities we can have there? The other piece is, acknowledging that we did a lot this year. How, if we're meeting certain baselines, if we are really working to be at, I would say, the front cutting edge of the metro on housing policy, what incentives or funding can we qualify for with the state to really help incentivize other communities to join us in that place? And for us to say, like, yeah, you've met these markers and you can have access to additional funding, because that 30% and below AMI work is not going to happen in the market naturally. It's going to have to be much more intentional, and we could really use some assistance with that. And then I will actually pass it to the mayor to talk a little bit about what is everyone's favorite topic, construction defects.
Yeah, just to piggyback on that, obviously we're taking steps within Englewood to allow for smaller starter homes to be built within the city itself. But obviously the one aspect that we can't really control is just the construction of condos. And so obviously there's been a lot in the news about, I know Denver Post has written about it. I think Colorado Sun also wrote about construction defects. So I think the ask there is just trying to figure out ways in order to allow for condos to be built within the city itself. I think we're down to about 3 to 6% are now being built in Colorado, when it used to be 1 in 5 back in 2007. There was reform back in 2017 that didn't really produce the results that we're looking for. So just looking to see what potentially we can do there. So some of the asks that we have on our side is just consider a statewide warranty standard that would provide developers who meet specific quality levels of construction, established by state extra legal protections, require individual parties involved in the construction process to take responsibility for their expertise, and then also provide stronger language to allow for a right to remedy, meaning that the responsible party has a right to fix a defect promptly or assign a qualified third party to fix it. So I'll pass it to the two of you for any comments regarding housing.
You go, Jeff.
All right. First of all, I'm so happy that you were able to pass that code with so little controversy and such broad support. I think to your point, though, you guys, that was yeah, you're welcome. That was a heavy lift, right? That was extraordinarily difficult for you all to do, and you faced political consequences for it. And I think we lost a fantastic member of city council in large part because of it. And so, you know, I really hear you when you say that because you're on the forefront of doing this, you should have some sort of benefits, right? There should be state fund. You should have priority when you're applying, for instance, for CHAFA's state version of a LIHTC funding, right? Like that should be something that you would have better access to. If you're looking at 1, 2, 3 funding. Was it a LIHTC loan or was it the state version?
What was it, Sean, that we applied for with CHAFA and we didn't get this year? We can follow up with you, but it's a good example.
Follow up with me. Let me know. Yeah. And so this is something we usually put into statute. And I know that Gov's last big housing push, not last year, not 213, but before that, there was, I think, $50 million in incentives that came from the housing committee that I served on, looking at ARPA dollars. We got about a quarter of all the ARPA dollars that came into the state we spent on housing, so almost $1 billion. And I was on the committee that developed the legislation around that. One of those pieces of legislation was what you mentioned to get funding to do your housing study, the Innovative Housing Grant Program. So that was a bill that came from that committee. And tied in with that was, if you do certain things, then you get certain funding from the state for low income, middle income housing development. How that's played out, I think housing has there's not enough money. The state is not spending enough money on this. And especially when you look at low income housing, that is always the role. The state has a role in building that and providing that, because it is a public good when folks have a place that they can afford to live, and that they're not homeless on the street. We have a huge challenge with our unhoused community, not just in Denver, but up and down the Front Range and in the metro area. And Englewood has definitely seen a share of this. So ensuring that there's a place that folks can live, in ways that we can help give those folks a way to get off the streets and start their life. It's not just the homeless transition, though. It's a lot of low income folks that have jobs, that are working, that are contributing to our communities and just need a place to live. And then you look at the middle income folks, nurses, teachers, firefighters, and you look at what's available in the metro area year over year, you actually have fewer units available that are affordable for these folks. So affordability is roughly a third of income. So if you're looking at 80 to 120% AMI, area median income, really nurses, teachers, firefighters, other teachers tend to be on the lower spectrum of that 80%, sometimes below the 80, because we don't fund public education enough, but that's a different topic. So nurses, teachers, firefighters in that middle. If you're spending a third of your income, that is an appropriate amount to spend, generally speaking. There are fewer units available in the metro area, not fewer that are built, not like fewer relative to the population. Total number of units that are affordable for people in that range decreases year over year. That's crazy. I mean, that is eating into low income housing, because these are folks that can afford to pay higher rents than folks on the lower end of the economic spectrum. So housing that maybe would have been taken up by someone earning, say, 50% AMI is now being sold to someone making 80 to 100% AMI at a much higher rent. And it just is a massive distortion in the housing market. But because, and I know Englewood is doing a better job of this, but because planning and zoning commissions are taking years, right? Like it's like 90 days. You should have a response in 90 days. 2 years would be an improvement for most of these projects to get through planning and zoning, to get responses from planning and zoning. So you have staff approval processes, planning and zoning processes, and then you have approval from city councils. And then you have citizens coming in and saying, you know what, we actually don't want that building that has spent 5 years and $5 million trying to build on this location. And then they run an initiative that slows it down even more. I mean, that's a big part of why developers are just not building in a lot of these areas. And when they are building, they're building luxury, because the costs associated with trying to make it through planning and zoning commissions on the Front Range and is just absurd. So you have a lot of challenges at local levels that are making housing more expensive. You have a lack of funding at a federal level and a state level for a lot of these low income and middle income projects. And we at the state have done $1 billion of investment over the last few years to try and solve this, and it is still not enough. So we are looking this year at a variety of solutions that are not just the 213 solutions, but that really provide those incentives and hopefully provide those rewards for communities like yours that have picked up that fight, that have made the changes that are going to allow more homes to be built. I love the cottage court stuff. I mean, like, you're creating neighborhoods, you're creating people that care about each other and see each other. And that is exactly the kind of place that people would like to live next to. So I want to compliment you on all of the work that you did to make those changes. And it is my hope that more communities follow suit. And I believe this year there will be strong incentives to do so from the state.
Well, I just want to
That was my summary.
I want to say something about that quickly, because I think it's important, because people are watching. Our neighboring cities they watched Englewood this year. They watched the experience, and other cities will not follow and will not be willing to pay the same political cost if it is not worth it. And so I cannot express the gravity of the moment, especially in a post 213 world. If there is not real incentive, it will not happen at the local level. And so there really has to be more action here. And I just really hope that you hear the seriousness of that, because it's not like, oh wow, that was nice that you were able to do that. Obviously, we're very aware, even with living all the statistics that you just mentioned. But I have talked to other local governments, and they have said there's no way we would be willing to do what you guys just went through.
I mean, if you just look at the Sam's property, if that property can't be developed next to Santa Fe, across formerly commercial property, across from another commercial property, next to a higher density place already. So that's one piece of it, the difficulties that Jeff outlined and that you lived through. And the other piece of it really is, what of those municipalities and local governments that aren't part of the solution, who are not forward thinking. And when we went on that housing tour, there were people on the bus who's are willfully not developing property around light rail, but are reliant on workforce housing elsewhere. They sure are hiring the people that they, or they want folks to give them goods and services. They just don't want to participate in housing. So, I mean, you guys are doing so many things right. I think as we look at this, we are looking at carrots and sticks. The governor is very much a carrot person, but our budget just does not allow for huge bonuses, incentives, and in an environment where he's the governor, the first floor, I think, is loath to penalize, and the fight with CML would be huge if we were to penalize folks who aren't participating in forward thinking. So we end up with the really the only incentive is technical assistance. Like DOLA will help you with technical assistance.
Yeah, that's so we have a ton of money with 123, and 123 had a ton of strings attached to it in order to get that money. And those strings can be made stronger. And they should be more, the prioritization of those funds should be more directed towards cities that are doing more and less for cities doing less. There's a threshold you need to meet to get that funding. And once you meet that threshold right now, my understanding is that once you meet that, it's sort of like all in and anybody can apply. It should be that that's the threshold to apply. And then the more you do, the more likely it is that you will get those funds, 100%. I'm working on a set of tax rebates. There's a tax credit right now at the state level that works very much like LIHTC. It's sort of the state version of LIHTC, which is it's a tax credit that funds low-income housing. And I'm looking at a way to try and increase that dramatically. The Gov has asked for a $30 million increase in that. I think that's not anywhere near what it is that we need. And then additionally, to create an identical tax credit, but for middle income housing, for that 80 to 120% AMI, because those folks, those folks can afford to pay rent, right? Those folks can almost always afford to build. I passed a program a few years ago called the Middle Income Housing Authority that allows, that treats that housing like infrastructure, right? We need homes for middle income people just as badly as we need roads and bridges. And so we should fund it in a similar way to the way we fund roads and bridges, with very low interest municipal bonds. And so it essentially allows municipal bonding for middle income housing. And it is a super cool program. We've gotten interest from people across the country on what we did. And part of the reason it's not building more housing immediately is interest rates are out of control. So interest rates being as high as they are also means that a lot of people that would normally be building and creating more of that supply, which we desperately need, like interest rates, the cost of money, this is a weird thing to think about, but the cost of money is very high because of high interest rates, which makes it less likely that people are going to invest in creating the diversity of housing that we need and the supply of housing that we need.
helps. We want to every now and then be able to say something good to our constituents about what's happening, and it's wonderful when the local govs are doing things that are answering those constituent concerns.
Yeah, definitely not.
Let
Go ahead, John.
me echo that. I thank you for the great work you do. It has been quite a year for you all, and the idea of a recall election happening a month before an election is just insanity. And I can't imagine what that was like for all of you to whether you were in it or seeing your colleagues go through it. Like, that's just not how local government should work. Having conversations and trying to do good things. There's a recall every few years. It's called an election. And if you don't like how folks are voting, then that's when you should take them out. And it was just extraordinarily frustrating to see that. And you all handled it extraordinarily well. So thank you. Thank you for the work you did. Also, Code Next is great. I'm glad you passed it. And I'm happy to be on the record saying that. Good work. And the people of Englewood clearly agreed. So thank you all. And I know that it's not universal, but you guys, you put together something that I think you listened to all sides, and you put together something super reasonable and good. And I appreciate it. So